So now we can flip the manifold over and install this tube. The other end of this just kind of snaps in. All the rest of these just snap in at this point. So snaps in pretty easily. Oh, it's this one. So this one's going to go here, basically. So this one or that? Yeah. So the angled one, the angled end goes here. You'll be able to snap this in from above, actually. So I'm going to leave it off just for now, but you could snap it on. There's really not a problem. And also the lower hose, I'm probably going to snap it on. And again, I have my choice of either one of these hoses. Actually, it looks like this one's slightly longer, but either way, it's still good. I'll probably wash it out just 'cause. So there we go. And also, my old gaskets are actually fine. They're pretty pliable. You know, they're not hard and brittle and cracking. I think that they're sealing just fine. I never had any problems. And I actually took, I think I've taken 5 of these intake manifolds off of cars in the junkyard, and they were all pretty much like this. They weren't hard and brittle. They weren't like the valve cover gasket, which is always hard, always cracking, and the oil filter housing gasket, same thing. These are still pliable, so I would reuse these. I reused them last time, obviously, but I don't know. This time I just decided to buy some new ones, just 'cause. I guess I have money to burn right now. So I'm using new gaskets. Don't forget to reconnect this ground plug if you disconnected it, which I don't know why you would have. Remember how I told you needed 8 inches of 5/16 vacuum hose? That's for this right here. This goes to the upper intake boot. Hit it with some silicone. And that makes things way easier to get on. So the back of the intake manifold. Remember, this is the line that I had you cut earlier. This runs over to the around the side of the valve cover gasket. So you might need some silicone spray here to get this one off, but this one was new, so I can replace that. It's also a good idea to replace these lines. So this is how it's supposed to be. The wide end is facing facing towards the valve cover, and the black end is facing towards the intake boot side. So you can replace that. It doesn't matter which one this goes in, either the upper one or the lower one. They're both holes into the intake manifold. They're both just sources of vacuum. And also, you see I have like a little plug here. This is just for another option for other cars, for whatever they have. And this one's kind of split and cracking. So what I would suggest for this is basically rubber cement to cement this together. It's probably definitely still holding vacuum because it's it's being sucked on by the vacuum, and I think this actually extends further out than the cracking does. So here's some contact cement that I got at Walmart that will bond rubber along with other things. Also, you can get rubber cement in a tire patch kit, like for your bicycle. The ideal way to use rubber cement would be not to bond it until the cement has dried. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes for the cement for the solvents to kind of evaporate, for the actual rubber cement to be left behind. So I'll just kind of wedge that open with something for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'll bond it. I've already cut the replacement line, and for my car, the length was 7 inches, but your car might be a little different. So just put your 2 broken halves together, or your 2 cut halves, whatever, what have you, and then measure them and kind of go from there. But I just measured mine, and I'm 7 inches. So I'll just kind of install it into place. You can replace your lines, but I've already replaced mine, so I'm not going to. So it just occurred to me that this rubber cement might take like 24 hours to cure properly. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap it with electrical tape just to kind of hold some pressure on it, because I don't really want to wait. It's just a plug anyway. It really doesn't matter. This line, which runs from the vacuum canister down over up to the intake manifold, you're going to want to replace this as well. This is also 1/8 inch vacuum line, and I replaced it last time, but go ahead and do yours. That's what that's for. That's where it's going to go. Now we can pull paper towels out of the intake ports. By the way, I did mention compressed air, didn't I? Make sure there's no dirt down in there. On the positive cable, I'm gonna remove this bracket rather than struggle with getting it back up through. So we're gonna feed. By the way, I've taken the lower CCV tube off of the intake manifold. It's just a little easier to kind of maneuver it into place, and I can still snap it back in there once it's in. So I'm gonna take that battery cable and slip it up through the top, the hole in the intake manifold, and I'm gonna slip this thing down into place over the studs up here. Making sure I got it on all those studs. And then the tricky part is just making sure the bottom bracket kind of slips over that stud properly. And it's probably a good idea to get that ground cable kind of in its little bracket, which you kind of just got to do by feel. Yeah, okay, so slipped in there, making sure we are on the studs up here first, and then, so basically if we tilt it upward like this, it's easier for that bracket to snap on down there. So that's kind of the easiest way to do it. And I'll fish the positive battery cable underneath here, and it'll eventually run back there. So I'm going to put those 11mm nuts back on. I'm just running them down with my impact ratchet first, because we're going to torque these later. It's very, very important to torque these to the proper specs, which I'll give you in a sec. I'll have to do that back one by hand. And of course this one. Now, there's no particular tightening or torquing sequence. It's 11 foot-pounds, by the way. But since there are two separate gaskets, basically, I'm going to think of it, as two separate ones, and I'm probably just going to start in this middle and then go towards the outside right there. So I probably should have started with that one, but again, there's no published sequence, so. So for that vacuum line on the back of coming off the back of the intake manifold, this one, here's the other one that we cut, and I'm just gonna sort of spray it with silicone. There. That's it. Just goes in there. So here on my elbow that goes to my upper intake boot, I've got that lower vacuum line. This line runs all the way down to the fuel pressure regulator. So you don't have this on every model of E46, but if you have this, you might want to replace this line. It's probably old, and this was the line that we replaced earlier, that 5/16 tube. Oh, let's hit that with a little silicone just to make it easier. So here we go, new line. I'll tuck it up out of the way just for now. Remember, there's that electrical connector which runs up to the that solenoid on the back here of the intake manifold. We'll have to hook that in blind, but there we go. It's in and not coming back out. So eventually we're going to put this back around behind me. Actually, I'll do it now. And put it back up here because it's going to go. That's for the fuel injectors. So it's going to run behind the intake manifold and go back in. Remember, this vacuum line coming from the vacuum canister down there, it goes to the back of the intake manifold and it goes to that upper port. Either one of those two ports does not matter. And you'll kind of have to feel for it. You can just feel where the old one's coming out of, or the other ones are coming out of, I should say. Yeah. There we go. And the nice thing about this this electronics sort of distribution box, for lack of a better term, is that you can basically see all the cables that are coming out of it and figure, you know, which ones go where. This one, for example, goes to the, I know it goes to the throttle body because it's the only one that's got 6 on it. This is going to go up to the idle air control valve. That's for the DISA. This is for the mass airflow sensor. You can just kind of, you know, it's easy to take stock of them because they're just all right here. There's a lower one down here that actually plugs into it. This is the only one that actually plugs into the electronics box there. So I'll hook that one back up right now. And also while I'm here, I'm going to put the lower CCV tube in because this is just a good time to put it in. And I think I'm going to run it underneath the water tube. This seems like that's where it wants to run. And make sure you tug back down on it to make sure you got a good connection. So let's put that 16mm nut back on that lower intake manifold bracket right there. And I would suggest getting this one pretty tight because it's actually, I believe it's rattled off on me before. In fact, I'm going to get a longer ratchet that I just acquired. Longer flex head ratchet. Okay, feels pretty good. Time to reinstall the throttle body. I've just got one of the fasteners in it, so I can kind of get it threaded on and somewhat in place. These are also 11 foot-pounds. So I'm going to put the idle air control valve in there now, and I'm going to hit its grommet with some silicone. The smaller end goes in first, the bigger end goes out. These are those T40 Torx bolts. Don't drop them. Don't lose them. By the way, when you drop things and you do lose them, 90% of the time they wind up on top of the aluminum skid plate, which sucks. So let's connect the last tube for the CCV system. That just connects down into the CCV, the bottom there. It snaps in. I like to pop a little silicone spray onto every O-ring. Just helps it along. Okay, with silicone spray on both of the O-rings, you know, it might be a good idea for you to snap this one in place before you put the intake manifold back on. Save yourself some time. I think maybe I have it because I'm pulling back on it and it doesn't want to come back. So, because when these O-rings are fresh, I mean, I'm even having problems with the one up here. I would say work them on a couple of times first. Yeah, this one's really difficult. There we go. Let's reconnect all these electrical connectors now. This is for the throttle body, for the throttle itself actually. This small sort of 3-pronged one goes to the alternator. This one, it's another 3-pronged one. It goes to the idle air control valve. You kind of get this back on where it needs to go, which is right there. There's one of these that has only one actual connector in it. That goes to the oil temperature sensor down here. I think it's an oil temperature sensor. It actually might be an oil pressure switch. There. This one here, I think that's the temperature. And this funny looking one goes to that evap solenoid. This is for the throttle body, the mass airflow sensor, I mean. And this is for the DISA valve. Goes up here. So we'll bolt that back in now. There's a nut and, or there's a bolt and 2 nuts. Use that 10 mil deep socket to put the nut back on. Don't forget that this little line right here, it actually connects to the evap solenoid. I'm going to take the electrical connector back off. Remember, it connects to the bottom of it. Make sure it snaps in securely. We can put the solenoid back in there and reconnect it. So this is the old O-ring from the oil dipstick tube. And I'm going to replace it with a new one. The old one's fine, you know, it's still pliable, but it's not quite sticking down in there very hard. So anyway, I'm replacing it with a 20 by 3 millimeter metric O-ring. And the dipstick tube just kind of goes down. You can spy the little hole that it goes down into, the oil hole. Make sure that this bracket sticking out of the side of the dipstick tube doesn't get caught up on anything. Right now it's caught up on the coolant line, so it just has to get by it. And this little plastic tube that goes down to the fuel pressure regulator snaps in right there. And we have that 13 millimeter bolt that bolts the dipstick tube down to the mounting bracket. It's always good to, it gets confusing when we get tight like this, but it's easier for me if I just know what everything is. So that's kind of why I'm naming things as I go here, so that you can know what everything is too. I remember that this is actually the bolt that was loose on me one time, so make sure this one's nice and tight. Now I'm going to get this the CCV, the lower CCV hose, just down onto the oil dipstick tube. That's that little line where it's supposed to connect to. There. Basically just down in there. Hopefully we'll get enough light to see that. So that's where basically it goes to that little tube on the dipstick. I'm going to put the fuel injectors back in now. I've been sure to keep them in order. It's just a good practice. Even though they are interchangeable, it's better to do it that way. With the fuel hose, you're going to have to make sure you route it correctly. I had to stick it up under those vacuum lines that run to the side of the intake manifold. So I just spent some time to route it down underneath them so that it popped up in front of them, over on this side of them. So just make sure you do that, and then we can just take the fuel line and reconnect it, pop it back on. It snaps in place, and there we go. I'll take the fuel rail and just pop it back over top of the injectors. I'll just kind of wiggle it down on top of each one. You can sort of twist each injector, the connector of each injector from side to side to get it to get the injector to wiggle into the fuel rail. So we'll put these clips back on. There are lower slots and there are upper slots on the fuel injector. there's also this ridge on the end of the fuel rail. This is the clip that goes in there. These little teeth that stick out go into the upper slot on the fuel injector, and these little slots here, these open holes, those fit over this part on the fuel rail. That's what it looks like when it's installed right. Just like that. Remember to bolt down the fuel rail. Well, that's not good. Would you believe I found it by blindly sticking my magnet down there? Talk about lucky. I think I'm going to actually start it this time. In fact, this might be a little stupid of me to tighten them. Remember what I'm always saying about starting all the bolts before you tighten them? That's exactly why. Now, you can take the harness. Now, the cool thing here is that you can put these clips back where they were, because these will just push on now. This is going to fit underneath the this tube here. And remember, the fuel injectors sort of twist from side to side, so you'll have to kind of get them in position, in the right positions, before this will snap on. Yeah, there we go. Boom, boom, boom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The air temperature sensor connector. Then over here, this is the Vanos solenoid. Where did that go? Anybody remember? So I just reviewed my footage, and this goes to the coolant temperature sensor, which was down there on the block between cylinders 5 and 6. Actually, more around cylinder 6. So I would suggest you do not even disconnect it. I'm going to have to sort of blindly feel for it. Actually, you know what? I can see it. It's right here. Actually, no, that's the manifold bolt. But no, I can feel it with my finger. And good thing these are just push-ons. Okay, there. Put these little clips back in. These hold the oxygen sensor connectors. Now we can reconnect the battery cable. By the way, this right here is one more vacuum line that you're going to want to replace, and most likely this one's going to be so brittle it just cracks, because mine definitely did. This is the exhaust side of the engine. This is coming from that solenoid on the back of the intake manifold, and you just replace the line and it goes into right here. So just right there. Now for this little bracket here for holding the battery cable. Fits down there. And the nut. Now this was the optional step, but I'm going to reconnect the coils here. So we could have left this in, but you know. Now I believe it actually goes over top, because it comes out of the top of the manifold, of the little plastic thing that goes along here. And this is just a nut right there, 8mm nut, which I had screwed back on right here just so I wouldn't lose it. This is just like a ground cable. And so that is pretty much it. Now you can refer back to the common item removal video to see how to put everything else back on. And then you can start the vehicle, test it out, see how you did. All right, well, looks like a BMW again. I'm going to start it up and see what happens. Yeah, just took the fuel pump a couple seconds to fill the line. And there we go. Alrighty, well, what is there to say besides you've seen how there are a lot of vacuum hoses that could be replaced, probably need replacing on your vehicle, and if anything, you definitely saw how that crazy tube is supposed to fit through the intake manifold and how you're supposed to twist the oil separator onto it. And seeing it the way that you did, you can see how to do it with the intake manifold still on the vehicle. As long as you take the throttle body off the intake, the idle air control valve, as long as you take that out of there, you have enough room to get access and get up in there and do it. So that's probably one really good takeaway from this video. Also, I want to mention about the starter. It really wasn't possible for me to get access to the two bolts that hold the starter onto the engine, even from above there, because there's just not enough clearance to get a socket onto the back of it. It looks like there is, but there really isn't. One thing I did try was I went out and I bought these universal spline wrenches. You know, these work for e-Torx, and they work for everything basically. They're like 6 different fasteners that these would work on, and a number 10 would actually work on those number 12 e-Torx fasteners. But there wasn't. I mean, there wasn't a lot of room to be able to kind of crank on this wrench, and this is a really small one. If you put like a little cheater on the end of it, you probably could crack them free. So you might be able to do it that way. I did not want to try that while I was doing this. I could have got another video out of that, but I really did not want to mess with that because this was a big enough job as it was. But to actually do that, I believe probably the easiest way to do this starter would be to remove the intake manifold and then lower the transmission mounting bracket, and so you can just sort of lower the transmission in the back, and basically the whole engine and the transmission will tilt this way, and then you'll have room to get up behind it with a very long extension with some sockets. That would probably be the easiest way to remove it. So not only do you need to take the manifold off, but you need to get in there from behind. That's the easy way. I've heard of people doing it with everything still in the car. I've heard of them doing it with the manifold still in the car and everything. I don't know. It probably took them 8 hours. Me, I like to kind of make things easy on myself, but whatever. Anyway, again, enough of my yapping. I hope this video helped you, and good luck replacing your CCV.